I had a great interview with Adeola. I think it was last month or a few weeks ago, before that. And her interview is going live next Thursday. And we had this amazing conversation on various topics, including obviously tarot and how that embeds into her work. We also talked about her work around connecting physical spaces with human behaviors and emotions. We also talked about the future of work, and we even used the tarot cards to answer some of those questions as well. So I thought it'd be great to have this informal conversation with Adeola, as a bonus to the episode that's coming out next week. So every time I speak with Adeola, I get this insight that I never thought I had. And a lot of times, the insight is within me, but Adeola has this magical gift of, I don't know, just triggering that insight out of myself. So Adeola, thank you so much for joining us again. I'll pass the mic to you now.
Yeah, thank you, Nareesh, for having me. I remember our conversation, I think it happened at the end of February, and it was really stimulating. It was nice because I think it was the first time that I really talked about the practice of how I use tarot and design, just actually talked about it, about why I started doing it. And I think, so just to remind everyone, I think you guys already know, but I kind of have had a parallel practice of tarot for the last 20 years or so. It kind of started at the beginning of after I graduated college and during my first job, I was experiencing, I guess when I look back on it now, I was experiencing the things that you experience when you're the first person in a department that they've ever employed who's a woman and who's Black, and you're like the only one. And you're also a young person, so you're the youngest person and it's your first job, and you're excited to be there and do a good job, but you're sort of running into invisible barriers that they don't really train you for when you're in college and thinking, okay, I'm going to be good at this or good at design, or I'm just going to do a good job. So yeah, it was actually in downtown Manhattan, walking home from work one day, that I ran into a store and decided to get my first deck. And it kind of, from that time on, it kind of became a way for me to surface, to just start to learn and to surface other feelings, energies, emotions, things that might be going on in the environment, in a situation that were otherwise difficult to articulate, even for all the people involved. It also helped me to kind of clarify my own intentions, work my way through a morass of murky feelings, power situations, all the soft sort of, what I like to call these days, soft power dynamics that go into any working situation, especially into creative working situations where there's a lot of egos involved and so on. And there are a lot of explicit intentions, but also a lot of implicit or unacknowledged intentions and motivations and practices. So tarot always kind of worked alongside me. And then it wasn't until all these changes during the pandemic when it really kind of became, again, a daily practice as opposed to an occasional practice. It sort of became a sort of daily, it's part of a daily meditation practice, part of a daily exercise and yoga practice, that I started to realize, oh, this is what the tarot has been doing for me over these past years. Now, just before the pandemic hit, at the end of 2019, I got a commission from a design museum to develop a program for them. And I decided at that point to go to create the Tarot of the Working Woman, which was, again, a way of kind of surfacing stories that I'd heard from feminine people who've had femme working experiences, if you will, or femme people who've had working experiences in design, over, the last couple of decades. And it was a way to sort of to surface those experiences and bring them into a workshop format and start to sort of work with them and develop, I guess, maybe shared protocols for navigating common experiences. And then, of course, after this daily practice during the pandemic that helped to keep me focused and sane, I thought, oh, okay, well, I can just also share this beyond that project, share this with a broader audience of designers. So that's what happened. I started to share, I decided to share tarot for designers in a couple of different formats. First in one-on-one kind of coaching sessions. So I started to include it as an option within my coaching practice. Usually when I do coaching, I do 6 sessions that are targeted on a particular issue or with a person or a particular skill or something that we're going to focus on for 6 sessions. But I thought that the tarot is really great for working in a quick kind of one-on-one session, maybe with past clients or with new clients who want to kind of try out an experience or get like a direct answer or kind of work through a very specific question, or even develop what core questions that they have right now in their work path. And then I expanded it into a course, which you were part of, Naresh, and Jason was part of. That was kind of just intended as an introductory course and an exploratory course. And then going forward, I think I'm going to develop several workshops on several themed workshops related to tarot for designers, or that I think might address needs that are coming up, more general needs that are coming up within my coaching practice and my consulting practice that I think other people might benefit from, like addressing in, say, like a 1-day workshop or a 3-hour workshop. So yeah, I mean, I would say that that's sort of my story of, how tarot for designers came to be and kind of how I use it now. Is that okay?
That's great. Yeah.
Set the scene. Okay.
That's awesome. I just wanted to also welcome Nicola. Nicola and I,
Hi, Nicola.
Worked together in London a few years ago before the pandemic. So Nicola, thank you for joining us. So I think one of the things that fascinated me about tarot, and my first experience with tarot was in your workshop. So I had no idea about what tarot was. I've seen some like cards lying around that my wife had bought. I'd never actually used it. So one of my first experiences with tarot was how it actually helped me make these invisible connections that I didn't know had. I think one of the questions that we asked in the workshop was, what does the future of work look like? And we actually pulled out different cards to answer that question, right? Instead of just writing down things that we know from my head, we actually used the tarot cards as prompts to help trigger these connections. And I found that actually helped me make these connections that otherwise I probably wouldn't have made. So I guess my question is, how can we use such a tool in a work kind of setting? Or can we even use a tool like tarot in a work setting to answer questions?
Well, I mean, I use it in my work settings, but I also structure my own work settings so that can be part of the practice. But let's start with the future of work. I think actually this is a good time because we've just, you know what? Because you guys are here and you're special, you get a special preview of a new project that's just hot off the presses. Well, it's not new, but basically I've been teaching a workshop at the Design Academy Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And the theme of the workshop over the past couple of years or couple of semesters has been the future of work, essentially, the future of living and working in Eindhoven. And it's masters, the students in the workshop are masters in social design students. I'm gonna add a link to the chat. And this is just hot off the presses, a kind of, just a simple website documenting some of the more recent projects of the students. So one of the things that came up repeatedly in this workshop, which, is the researchers in the workshop, the students are, I guess, in their 20s to early 30s, generally. And so they are somewhere between millennials and Gen Z. The youngest people are, I don't know, do we all share that same kind of designation of generations? Do we know what millennials are and what Gen Z are, which are the people, kind of the younger people, the next generation after millennials? So basically people in their early 20s to, well, Gen Z is technically people from like 10 years old to 40, more or less. That covers both generations. But so this particular group of people that I've been working with are in many ways early career. They've worked as designers before in different disciplines, and they're taking up social design as a kind of umbrella discipline for all of these many questions that they have about the transformation of society. So in this workshop, we work on the future of work. And one of the things that came up repeatedly for these young people, especially post-pandemic or what they've experienced during the pandemic, is that the future of work for them feels very bleak. They're not with kind of the baby boomer ideologies about work. They work a lot, or come from cultures of constant work, all the time work, constantly being on. They come from cultures of affective labor, having to use social media to advance their work. They deal with all kinds of mental health issues related to that, and related to also to collaborating across generations and in complex work environments. And also they deal with kind of the heavy burden of being like a generation that actually actively, honestly has to face climate change in their lifetimes and really has to deal with the consequences. And they can't afford to pay lip service to it, but still stay in their houses and use up all the electricity and the water and stuff like the generations before have. So they actually have to deal with this in our kind of post-industrial/industrial world. So with all of this weight on their shoulders, starting their careers, I noticed that all of them in their imagination of the future kind of really were looking for ways of working that allowed them to be able to surface these issues, to be able to take care of themselves and their mental health, and to be able to be mission-driven, like having to be mission-driven, for example, the climate change thing, but also social issues that are important to them, such as the way that they're able to express themselves in terms of gender, issues of racial inequality. These are things that are actually like real issues to this generation in ways that I don't think we've seen before. So when all of those things kind of come to the surface, it turns out that many of them are interested in all kinds of alternative work practices. And while I don't usually introduce tarot in my teaching context, when it's not specifically my class, I found that many of them were very interested in picking up this skill. I think what we found very useful about the tarot is that it's kind of what you were saying, Narish, is that it provided this kind of, I don't know, it was kind of like either a filter or also a way of gathering together many complex issues into an image or into several images or into certain sequences. It allowed for creative conversations to align around issues that might otherwise be viewed as separate or difficult to look at together or difficult to kind of connect into one narrative or one story. It's a kind of like nice, almost a quantum storytelling methodology. that allows you to move forward and backwards in time, or that allows you, again, to work with several layers of a given issue. So I guess an example might be that if you're trying to, I don't know, as one student might be, you're trying to, I don't know, design a kind of, whatever, like a work sharing, a new kind of a variation on a work sharing platform. So you're kind of doing like an interaction / experience / social design project, and it's about work sharing in a given city. All of a sudden, you start thinking about all of these issues about who can use the platform, about the exploitation of labor, free labor, gig economies. You're also thinking about the sustainability of this platform and all of these other things. And at the same time, you're trying to align and articulate your real intentions as a designer behind doing this. That's a lot. That's a lot of layers. And you can get lost in the weeds of making it look good, making it functional. You can get lost in the weeds of who's going to buy into this? How can I sell this? Who's going to support this? That you might lose your own sort of through line, your own red thread through this scenario. That's the kind of moment in which pulling a tarot card or pulling a couple of tarot cards allows you to stop, reflect, and maybe surface some of the blocks in your thinking or in your processing or in your feeling that are making it difficult to see your way through this project, right? So that's one. So I don't know. I find that in thinking about a new way of working that incorporates these various levels of issues, I found, especially amongst younger people, a great deal of interest in any kind of methodology that's going to help them be able to better hold all of this complexity, within one practice.
Great. I'm just going to open the floor to people if you have any questions for Adeola at this stage. Jason, Nicola, Jude. We have Sarah join us as well. Sarah, welcome.
Hey, Sarah.
And
it's very early in California, so I'm very happy to see Californians joining us all the way to London.
Great. Welcome, Sarah. Are you in California at the moment?
Oh, are you on mute? Sarah, can you hear us?
I can. Yes, okay. It's early. It is. I tried to get up earlier, but I couldn't.
No, I'm happy that you're here. It's super early. This is unfortunately
what time is it there for you?
The latest we could do it.
6:30 or 6:30. I literally have been hitting snooze for the last few minutes. I was like, get up.
Okay, we're not going to drag you into this. So you just wake up slowly, take your time.
Great. I think Jason's joining us from his computer now. I think he's home now.
Awesome.
Hi, Jason. So any questions? Like for example, like Nicola, Jude, Sinem is here as well. What's been your experience with using tarot for, in terms of your work context, like design or technology or anything that you're, problems you're solving?
I guess just from my experience, because I had the same as you, I'd only used it in the context of Adeola's workshop. And so I did 2 of the 3 sessions. Unfortunately, I didn't do the third. So I did one of the exercises with my wife afterwards and stuff, which is interesting. And she was quite surprised that I entertained doing tarot, because I'm not a very spiritual person or in any way, I don't know, inclined to do those sorts of things, whatever those sorts of things are. And I guess, I found it really interesting because, it poked at different parts of me and my attitude and, lots of stuff that resonated with me. But I guess like part of me feels like it's something related to what you said, Nerish, around it's the difference between kind of having like a blank canvas, like, you know, what do you think about X, versus kind of having like a probe or a perspective provided to you, however that's provided. Like I part of me, my skeptic in me still thinks that anything that the card said could have been useful for me to kind of provide a lens into a problem I was facing. And so for me, I don't read too much into necessarily, you know, that was the card that was chosen versus that one, but it was just a piece of, so from the creative in me, it's a point of random stimulus or something that could be useful as a perspective. Now, as an experienced practitioner, Adeola, I'm sure you hate that perspective or don't understand it, but I wonder about that. Like, how do you feel about that as a, you know, versus this card was for you versus this card is just a thing that is now part of you because it was pulled. And therefore, yeah. I don't know how
Jason, that's a great, I totally get where you're going. And that's a great question. I love that question. Actually, I don't pay any mind. It doesn't matter to me if it's random for you, if it's a stimulus for you, if you want to explain, you know, I'm a doctor in psychology. I have an idea about how minds work. And, you know, if you want to talk about associations or neurons or whatever, actually, it means nothing to you. It doesn't, you know, it's kind of like, you know, however you want to explain how the things work, I just care that it works, you know? And as far as I'm concerned, the extent, the levels to, you know, it's like one of those things where there's many levels at which you can meet a practice. Personally, I find that the more levels at which you can engage with a practice, the more you can get out of it, right? But whichever level that works for you, works for you. In many ways, tarot to me is a very great parallel for design, because how you feel about the tarot as like, it's kind of like anything's going to work in a way that's kind of prompting a creative mind. It's how a lot of people who are not designers feel about design. You know, like you're working in a bank. They're like, oh, you need a new application, or you need a new website, or you new thing. And you're thinking, look, I'm a financial person. I work in a bank. I know like we have money in the bank, like we're doing things. There's a stock market. And okay, I guess somebody somewhere on high in some department says we got to work with these designers now. And here comes some design weirdos. You might as well be witches. You might as well be just like, you know, ooh, you're doing whatever, you know. That's as much as people understand what that is, or take it as like a discipline that's like that they can understand or predict what it does, you know. It's like, okay, there's somebody's going to do some kind of design, and I guess they're going to make a website that allegedly works better and looks prettier. They're going to make it pretty, and that's supposed to do something for this. Okay, whatever. Fine, you know, we've got this much allotted in the budget for that, for these crazies, you know. But are we going to really be paying much attention to it? No. And also, are we going to think of it as a serious part of how we work here at the bank, or how we really function? Maybe a couple of people in the management might sort of have faith, you know, but they look like soothsayers. They look like, ooh, have faith in this design that we don't know what it is. What I love about that approach, and what tarot has really given me in 20 years of working with it, is this sense that it actually really doesn't matter if anyone in the room really believes in me as a designer, as a psychologist, as a tarot person. It doesn't matter what they think I am. It matters that I eventually get, you know, it matters to the extent that, you know, if I present myself as a doctor, maybe it gives me more space and time to do something. If I, but it's all part of a general razzle dazzle. The point is, I'm trying to understand my intention and what I know probably needs to happen in this space, in the space of this project. At the same time, I'm trying to understand other people's motivations and intentions and emotions. And it's always complex. And part of that is how they receive me. So if you're a designer and you've walked into a room and half of the people you know are just like, I don't know why I'm in this meeting about design. I've got much better things to do at this bank than sit around and talk about, our branding or how this, like, I don't care. If you're sitting there and like half of the people you have to work with have that kind of attitude or have varying levels of understanding, or on the other side, think that you're made of magic, like, oh my God, things have been going bad. As soon as you sprinkle some design dust on it, it should go better, right? Right. So if you're going in, to me, it's really important as a designer to understand and appreciate all those levels of projections, intentions, goals, some that are spoken, some that are unspoken, some that are not able to be spoken, because those are all the exciting part of what you're working with in order to advance your project or to understand or anticipate where you're going to sort of run into sticky parts, where you're going to have smoother parts, who you have to kind of get on board, who you can kind of ignore. So I think that the question you're asking is really a broader question about methodology and about intention and about belief and the necessity for it. I think what's important is that we understand what our intentions are when we go into the room, and that we understand and we're choosing, that we have a choice in what we're working with. If we don't know what we're working with in the room, or if we ignore what we're working with, or if we're just like blinded by our own brilliance of our project, we're going to lose our sense of choice as designers. So tarot makes me a better designer or a person who is better at working with complexity in the room, because it just helps me experience skepticism very well. Like I can deal very well with skepticism. Like I don't have to do anything, for example, but it allows me to kind of, it humbles me to work with all of this, in a way that tarot acts as a kind of trigger for that. It helps me see like, oh, okay, this person might actually just be afraid that devoting this amount of budget to this is just a total waste of resources. And they just are scared because they've had a history of having things like this not work out for them, or they've had bad experiences in the past. I can't ignore that. That's now part of the thing. Or I can choose to say, you know what, I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to know that that's there. I'm going to ignore that. I'm not going to address that. I'm going to pivot into this other area where I feel like there's a lot more buy-in. But that's a choice. Moving ahead and just thinking, I'm a great designer and I've got a great intention and I've got a great project and I just don't understand why I'm getting these vibes, every time I come over here. So yeah, so I don't know if that was just a kind of rambling answer, but I guess what I'm saying is ultimately, it really doesn't matter to me the level at which you buy in to whatever it is I'm selling. If I'm in the room, I'm in the room. And it's important, it matters in the sense that it's important for me to understand. It's important for me to sense that, to sense where your level of buy-in is if we're going to work together, like in a tarot class or in a session related to that. But in the same level, in the same token, it's important for me to know your level of buy-in to design or your understanding about what you think it is, and before we get started working together. But it doesn't matter for us to have a successful experience with it, if you understand. So it's less, it doesn't matter what you think it is. It matters if it works or not.
Thank you. That does help. Yeah, that makes sense. Design thinking is like witchcraft. Witchcraft is like design thinking. No, just.
Well, look, people have been hawking design thinking for years. It's a little bit kooky. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I think it's a nice way of thinking about it. But I think like it's interesting from the point of view of even just my experience in the workshops is the framing of the questions and stuff was really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
The framing, the structuring of that process and the inquiry, and the tarot acts as like that a stimulus of inquiry to go deeper and see what part might connect with you. But it's still you, the person doing some of the work. It's not like, I think there's maybe this feeling that I had before that that's an abdication of myself in the card or something, like the card is telling me the truth. It's like no, the card is kind of shining light on the truth within you, and you are then identifying that maybe, and that light shone on it wouldn't have been shone on it in that way had that not been there. And maybe that's the way I was seeing it. And I guess, yeah, and I think it's interesting. It's just like going, but in a similar way, like, and sometimes people might see design as like going, well, we didn't do that interview with that type of person, or we didn't do that particular exercise, therefore we can't be sure the design is right. It's going, well, any context of design will always be different, and so take what you've got in some ways, do the best what you can to kind of get whatever inputs and process into it, but it is what it is at that time, and it will be different if you did it again with a different person or the same person at a different time. And I think there's something, yeah, it's just, I don't know, there's something in that. So help one.
Absolutely. I think also another thing is just the mimetic practice of working with a deck of cards, right? That there is a sense as a designer, I think there's another parallel with design here. There's a sense of designer that you do kind of work with a deck of cards. You do have several tricks, as it were, up your sleeve. And there are elements of your deck that you might be more familiar with. There are certain cards that you pull regularly that are kind of aligned with your way of seeing, your way of thinking, your way of feeling, that may or may not match with a particular project or client. Sometimes different projects or clients force you to kind of move into different sections of the deck. So one thing I like about tarot is that oftentimes a full tarot deck will be divided into 4 suits, if you will, that correspond with elements: fire, water, air, earth, which I kind of associate with things like brilliant thinking and, like making rapid connections and great talking, or with razzle dazzle and creativity and a great idea, or with, sort of like depth and slowness and building over time, and and really paying attention to the layers of emotion and history, or other things that are just or extreme practicality and groundedness. And if you transfer that into design practices, for me there are great parallels. There are lots of design practices that focus primarily on what I would call fire and air, fast thinking, fast talking people with big ideas and who have the ability to sell, or it's used in that way. But what I love about the design feeling, and a lot of design thinking is kind of positioned in that way. A lot of the design thinking of the last 20 years or whatever, associated with places like IDEO, for example, are focused, I think, in that fire and air area where there's fast thinking, lots of intellect, a lot of razzle dazzle, and a great way to sell things. And that's great. Design can be produced that way. But then there's this other areas, which are the kind of water and earth areas that I think Nirish is kind of pointing towards under the banner of design feeling, that really focus on slowness, depth, layers, emotional intelligence, building things over time, building relationships, a kind of practicality of design, a way of kind of being with design that can move it into unusual areas and that can allow it to connect with issues, problems, people, departments that it doesn't usually, right? So for me, the tarot is like really literally working with, trying to work with a fuller deck, if you will. So I think it also coincided, and it's why I took it out of a personal practice into a more sort of public practice that I wanted to speak with designers about, is because of this idea that during this pandemic and leading into it, I started to feel the need for more earth and water in design. And I'm speaking as a generally very air and fire person. You can tell I'm a real chatty Cathy. So this is a challenge for me, it provides a way of expanding. So yeah, I mean, I think more than just a, like for me, more than just a visual or random association. The cards actually have a structure to them that parallels skill sets that I think are worth developing, and they actually help me develop those skill sets in practice. Like they help me if a water card, for example, comes up as a potential way to like resolve an issue in the design process, then it's saying, chill out, go slow, less talking.
Sinem just
More,
sorry, Dylan, I interrupted.
less talking.
Sinem just private messaged me saying, can we ask Adeola to do a reading?
Oh, sure. Does anyone have a question? I always have my cards just at the ready. They're just over here. I thought someone might ask. Like, I got something.
So if you have a question, okay, Sinem's asked a question. Can I ask,
Yes.
what do I do?
Do you mean, can you elaborate, Sinem? What do you do about something, or what do you do as a designer?
Sinem is on the Eurostar tunnel at the moment, so that's why she can't have her video on. But I
No,
think
that's fine. What do I do about my life? Oh my goodness. Well, one of the big things is that it's important to ask. You get more if you ask more directed questions, or I should say questions that give you more agency in the answer, right? And that's just in general, just a good way of framing problems, right? Or, it's just a general practice. When you're given a brief, you've got to kind of make it your own. It's kind of like that. So I'm going to push you, Sinem, a little bit. I want to answer this question. Okay. How about I notice what brings me joy? Do you know what brings you joy? You can type into the chat. I know you can't speak now, but you can type into the chat. Do you know what brings you joy? I'm going to push a little bit. Okay, so I think you need to ask a different question. Not how might I notice what brings me joy, because you don't know what brings you joy. You might want to ask a question that's more along the lines of just something simple. Maybe, what brings me joy? And do you mean what brings you joy in your life, or what brings you joy in your work? Ask the question if it's about your life or your work. Rephrase it. So the process of what brings me joy in my life? I just want you to notice, look in the chat. I love that this is happening. Awesome. Because I like to go personal. So I love that this is happening with Sinem in the chat, because we can now see the refinement of the question. This is very much an important practice, I think, for design, in terms of getting to the question that matters. So we really started with, could I ask, what do I do, to what brings me joy in my life? It seems subtle, but it's a huge difference. And it clarifies the kind of answer you can get. All right, so now that we have a good question, I think we could do this. And I have a feeling that what brings Sinem joy in their life is going to have resonance for everyone here as well. Let's see. All right, Sinem's on the Eurostar. I hope moving very quickly towards joy. All right, let's see here. I'm just gonna pull one card. Oh, So this is the card that I just pulled. It's the 8 of Swords. I'll type it into the chat. And I'm working with the Dali deck. Meaning a deck drawn by Salvador Dali. See his little signature there. So I don't know if you could see very well, but there is kind of 8. So I'll just describe the scene. It's kind of like a little bit of a stormy or a night, or a kind of a darkish sky, cloudy, storm brewing. There's a sort of image of like a castle, a citadel. There's kind of like planets or rocks kind of floating and above the head of the main figure, which is a kind of feminine figure. And there's a sense that this is kind of a dreaming. It's kind of like a castles in the air sort of dreaminess, but there's a heaviness to that dream. It sort of feels like it's almost about to fall on the person and smush them. It looks like a kind of heavy rock thing or formation that might smush them with these sort of bubbles and planets around. And then there's a feminine figure in the center of all of this swirling stuff. And they're cradling something. It could be a little baby. It could be something, it feels though something special to them, something that they're holding and looking at, while there's this sort of butterfly, black and yellow butterfly superimposed around it, which also feels like it's protecting this little thing here. So I described the card, and I think what I feel it's saying about what brings you joy is that what brings you joy is something actually very, very small. What brings you joy is something very different from what you think. So I'm sure you're on the Eurostar hurtling towards a large city, to build more of your castles in the air. You've got a lot of heavy things on your mind. You got a lot of work stuff, heavy things on your mind. You're probably getting, let's say these swords, there are a lot of messages coming your way, difficult emails. Let's say there's difficult emails. There's a lot of difficult emails at your back. But actually, the thing that brings you calm, the thing that focuses on you, the things that you're focused on, is something very small, something organic. It feels even smaller than a little baby, although it's being cradled like a baby. And it feels secret and delicate, so much so that it's being protected by this, or almost or partly obscured by this black and yellow butterfly. So what brings you joy? I would say it's something that you're likely to find in inward focus. And it's something that feels like it's disconnected from, or almost like it feels like you have to protect it from where your mind actually is. It's something that emerges in this sort of meditative focus. It's something that you kind of probably hide and protect out of fear that you might be discovered looking at this thing that might be very too small and too silly to, we didn't send you to school to focus on this thing. We sent you to school so you could go see these big cities and make things happen and answer all those emails. Damn it. So I guess I don't know what brings you joy, but I think those are some clues. And your earlier question about noticing it requires more than notice. What brings you joy requires real care and protection and nurture. And it's not directly connected to all of the stuff that you actually spend your mental energy on. It's something that you might want to discover in meditation, or if you have a meditation practice, it would be helpful. So that's what I'll say about that. But thank you very much for the question. And I like, Sinam, that you said that you tried to be a sneaky client asking for all the things in a vague way. Didn't work. I don't do sneaky clients. Oh, that's so sweet. I went to school to be an engineer and always expect to have the fiery person in consultancy. I'm interpreting that it's embracing my vulnerability. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And you went to school to be an engineer, building big things, solving hard problems. And of course you have the capacity to do that. But let's say to do that better, this little cradly thing needs care and protection and nurturing, or this other stuff is going to kind of fall on your head. That's where you are. It's very close to falling on your head. I should probably I'm danger. It's close. It needs this time out is needed. You're welcome, Sinam. And I'm so happy to help someone on the Eurostar. I love the Eurostar and I'm glad it's running again. Good.
Great, thanks for the question, Sinem. And I could actually relate to like a lot of the readings that you're doing as well.
Awesome.
And also another thought that came to my mind was, it feels like it was something that would actually help us designers embrace ambiguity, because we, talk about embracing ambiguity. And there's so much ambiguity, even when you're doing the reading, because you're actually making the interpretation on the spot. You haven't prepared any of that, right? And that's basically embracing that ambiguity that comes, as being a designer, going through the process, and just with life in general, right?
Yeah, it's a way, I'm making the interpretation at the spot, but I'm drawing on a lot of things. I'm drawing on like studies of the traditional meanings of the cards. I'm drawing on what I know about Dali's mindset and bent in the way of drawing. I'm drawing on my own experience as a psychologist. I'm drawing on, my intuition. It's that the card, the process of pulling the card and the process of refining the question and working with Sinam allows me to bring as much of my fire, earth, air, water qualities all together in the moment. It allows me to bring as much of my different knowledge bases together in the moment. Whereas if I answered the question in terms of what the latest McKinsey report says about the future of work and how we should, which I know what it says about the future of work and how we need to focus on, how we need to take care of ourselves, focus on joy and our mental health. That's one way to answer the question. That wouldn't necessarily be wrong, but it just wouldn't draw out as much of my own skill sets and knowledge bases right into that moment. So I think that's what the tarot does for me. It allows me to connect the fire and air parts of me with the water and earth parts of me and give more. And
just
the results that I get, I'm happier with. Yeah,
just not just complete randomness, but there's some structure around that randomness, some structure, serendipity that you're bringing into the process.
Yeah, and even that, it's a marriage constantly. It's fire and air married with earth and water, but it's a marriage also of spontaneity. I like to allow the process. I can guide the process of refining the question or refining the brief. I think that's always important to what I can actually do, which we did with Sinam. But then without losing the spontaneity of the question, we get through the spontaneity, we allow the client to say what they really need. There's a looseness that's necessary for people to tell you what they really need.
Great.
And for you to see where it's coming from. And that allows me to then understand how to draw on all of those resources.
Great.
But thank you all.
Thank you so much for that, Adeola. So we'll run out of time, but how can people connect with you if they want to, follow you or find you online?
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know why I'm doing this. I was just here. I'm typing into the chat, that's my Instagram. And then on LinkedIn, I'm Adeola Enigbokan. And I guess, and you've linked to my LinkedIn if you came here. And you can contact me through there, or you can email me directly. And I'd love to hear from y'all.
Great. I'm also sharing the link to the podcast that will actually come out next Thursday. So Adeola's full interview on the Design Feeling podcast will be going live next Thursday.
Yeah.
So do check out that interview. Some really, really cool nuggets of wisdom on Adeola's work. So thank you.
Also to Sarah, she's always bothering me. I said that I would. Sarah, I will have a new workshop coming up soon.
Yay.
Yay.
I love that I'm always bothering you, and that
it's
that
great.
means that there's going to be a new workshop. So yes.
Do you know when it's coming out?
Yes. Look, it's coming. It's coming.
Public accountability.
It's coming. Yes. Okay. I will do it. I've got to do it before my birthday, which is in June. So I'm going to do it in May. It's going to come out in May. There's going to be a new opportunity to do a workshop. Even if it's a one-time workshop as opposed to a 3-time workshop, it's going to be coming out for sure. And I think the topic will be money.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the latest Design Feeling Fireside, and I'll hope to see you in the next one, which is happening in a couple of weeks' time. Details will be posted on the LinkedIn and Instagram and all the Design Feeling channels. So hopefully we'll see you then. And enjoy the rest of your afternoon and the rest of your morning back in North America if you're over there. And we'll see you again soon.